President Yoon Suk Yeol held back-to-back diplomatic engagements this week in Seoul. And among them, a top-level summit between South Korea, Japan, and China for the first time in 4.5 years amid global and regional tensions. Yoon also held a bilateral summit with the first-ever visit of a leader of the United Arab Emirates to South Korea. For our weekly focus this week, we discuss and delve into the significance of these meetings with our presidential office correspondent Oh Sooyoung, who's in the studio. Welcome, Sooyoung.
Hi, Eugene.
Lovely to have you. So my first question is, let's begin with how this trilateral summit actually came about amid difficult conditions.
Sure, Eugene. So as you said, the ninth trilateral meeting between South Korea, Japan and China, now that was the first since December 2019. If you remember, in the early months of 2020, we saw the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic becoming global, really, and that made it difficult for these in-person gatherings to happen. Also, in the past 4 years, relations between all three countries deteriorated. Among the many contentious points are Japan and China's regional rivalry and their territorial rift over the Senkaku and Diaoyu Islands, of course. Korea and Japan have their own territorial dispute over the Dokdo Islet, as well as wartime issues, including the compensation of Korean victims of Japan's forced labor. Now, this issue was what prompted Tokyo to instigate a bilateral trade war in 2019. On top of all of that, China's rivalry with the United States has made it hostile towards Korea and Japan as they align more closely with Washington in terms of regional security. Finally, last year, President Yoon Suk Yeol made painstaking efforts to restore bilateral ties with Japan, which led to all trade and security relations being normalized and their trilateral cooperation with Washington to deter North Korea being taken to new heights at Camp David. Since then, Yoon has been reaching out to Tokyo and Beijing to resume the leaders' summit between the three countries. So it's taken almost a year of Seoul's active efforts to bring its neighbours to the table, with China probably needing the most convincing. It seems all three countries at this point felt the need to lower tensions at a particularly sensitive time in regional affairs.
So when U.S.-China relations are not likely to improve dramatically, maybe in the foreseeable future, I think any form of improvement in China, South Korea, and China-Japan relations is, of course, what Beijing would like to see. So, but anyway, I guess this is precisely why the Chinese side appeared, extremely concerned when Japan and South Korea actually raised their voice on the Taiwan and South China Sea issue, and everything just put together, it seems to indicate that the current situation is no longer simple, diplomatic disagreement. It could be a very dangerous trend that Beijing finds, hard to accept. Like, will Tokyo and Seoul go maybe even deeper into cooperating with Washington? It's rather confrontational strategy against China. And so, on what circumstances, at least the pause button can be pressed?
So sensitive security issues were likely to have been avoided, but the meeting was significant in the very fact that it happened, as all three countries face the same kind of geopolitical uncertainties, trade uncertainties, not to mention the risk of pandemics and also their demographic challenges that they're facing, health issues, etc. So they're all on the same ship here.
I see. So will the agreements that were made actually help them overcome these tensions?
Well, yes, it seems that the points there in the declaration, they are very significant in that they've been really designed to continue dialogue between the three countries. So we see agreements on people-to-people exchanges. Now, that doesn't usually receive much attention in these kind of joint statements, but this time they were more or less the centerpiece, especially given how the tension between these countries fueled some animosity among their citizens as well. Also, cooperation on climate change, pandemic response, public welfare and health for their aging populations. These are perhaps lower key, but significant areas that can continue regardless of political tensions. Another key area was their commitment to resuming FTA negotiations and cooperating on supply chains. This was significant amid Washington's push to de-risk production and supply chains away from the Chinese market.
And I think it did show that all three of these countries do want to maintain contact. That even though they may have political differences and they may begin to belong to different economic blocs, they do need each other, at least for now, and they're willing to keep the channels open. So we've seen things like commitment to free trade. We've seen further movement on FTAs. We've seen Chinese efforts to increase direct investment into China to provide more jobs. They're having a very serious economic slowdown in China. So this will be one way of not only creating jobs, but also getting technology that they sorely need. And then the big question was, what were they going to do about supply chains? And they've at least kept the channels open to communicate with each other about supply chains, especially things like rare earth that China is capable of putting export controls on.
Together, the three Northeast Asian neighbours account for 25% of the global gross domestic product. So amid their differences, it's in the common interest of the three countries to collaborate, given their proximity and interdependence. So in this time of tension, it really is crucial to keep dialogue channels open and try to avoid misunderstandings.
Right, but South Korea and Japan did bring up North Korea's nuclear threats in a joint declaration and at a press conference, which you also attended, right?
Yes, it indeed was quite a tense morning because Japan had, in fact, been informed by North Korea that the regime would be launching a military satellite as early as the same day. President Yoon called it a clear violation of Security Council resolutions and said that the international community must respond sternly. The Japanese PM also strongly urged that North Korea cease the launch. However, the Chinese premier merely said that all parties involved must maintain restraint and prevent the situation from getting worse. Now, these different stances at the press conference were also clear in the joint declaration. All three sides agreed to make positive efforts towards a political solution for a stable Korean peninsula as a common interest and responsibility. But they merely reiterated their positions when it came to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and the issue of adoptees. Now, South Korea and Japan have been pushing for the denuclearization of North Korea in particular, and the release of their nationals held hostage by Pyongyang. But China, avoiding confrontation with the North, usually doesn't call for the denuclearization of North Korea, but of the peninsula, nor does it comment on human rights abuses in the North. During the two separate meetings with Chinese Premier Li Qiang on Monday, President Yoon requested China to play a constructive role regarding North Korea, as well as its weapons exchanges with Russia, emphasizing Beijing's duty to uphold the global nuclear non-proliferation system as a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Right, so let's now move on to the UAE president's two-day visit to Seoul, which 19 major deals and documents were signed.
That's right. It was a very impressive follow-up to President Yoon's state visit to Abu Dhabi just 1 year and 4 months ago. The two leaders agreed to advance their special strategic partnership in areas like the economy and investment, energy, nuclear energy and defense. And during this week's summit, they added artificial intelligence on top of that. As the backbone of these collaborations, the two sides signed a Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, which is South Korea's first FTA with a Middle Eastern country.
What's really significant is that they're going to reduce tariffs on our main products, including defense, energy, medical, etc. So what's really significant is they're opening up 90% of their medical market to Korea, and we'll be able to discuss exporting our energy, technology, and plant constructions, and also significant development in nuclear and defense, I think, is the key of this agreement.
They also agreed to work together on climate action, joint business ventures, including in the African market in areas like energy and infrastructure.
Right, and beyond these agreements, the friendship between the two countries was also something to highlight, right?
Yes, very much so. This was the first time that a UAE president visited South Korea, marking a new milestone in their friendship, the friendship between these two countries. So the welcome for President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan was the biggest yet by the Yoon administration, beginning with the UAE's leaders' entry into Korean airspace, where 4 Air Force F-15K fighter jets escorted his plane. On Tuesday, there was also a chromatic demonstration by the Korean Air Force's Black Eagles aerobatic team, which flew across the sky several times, leaving smoke trails in the colours of the South Korean and UAE flags. The UAE is South Korea's only special strategic partner in the Middle East, and the outcomes we saw from their summit were a testament to that kind of trust and friendship built between the two sides.
Well, I think it was definitely a busy week of diplomacy for President Yoon, to be followed by even more as he hosts more than 40 African countries at the first ever Korea-Africa Summit next week. All right, Sooyoung, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Right, always great to be here, Yujin. Thanks.